Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my LinkedIn Lives. I'm Jasmine Navarro, certified wellbeing coach, working with, I nearly forgot what I was going to say then. Working with young people and adults, helping them support their wellbeing. And as you know, every week I interview different experts who make a difference in people's lives. And today I'm super excited to be interviewing Audrey again. I can't believe our last one was a long time ago. I think it might have been 2 years ago. But
That's incredible.
I know, but very excited to have you again. And Audrey, would you like to tell us a little bit about you and what you do? And thank you again.
Sure. Thank you for having me again, Jasmine. My name is Audrey Hametner. I am the CEO and founder of the Bedrock Program, and we're focused on helping youth and young adults to understand their core values and to learn how to use those core values as a decision-making tool when looking at careers and really important life decisions and building confidence for themselves. I also work as COO for Upstrive, which is a well-being platform for youth in schools and businesses.
Wow, you sound very busy, and I see you're so busy as well. So I love this title, Anxiety Around Developing Independence. What made you choose that? And can you tell us a little bit more?
Sure. So this is the time. It's the time of the year when young people are doing their university applications, when they're looking at schools, when they're considering what they want to do. This is the time when parents are getting anxious about what's going to come in September and how the summer's going to play out. And this is normally the time when a lot of the anxieties that maybe had been below the surface up until now from both sides start to really come out. And I work a lot with families where the parents will say they didn't expect to have negative feelings about their child going off to university. And it's not so much about them going to university or college, it's more about them leaving the nest and being unsure as to whether or not they're properly prepared. And also just the transition, right? That whole transition from being the primary caregiver and the person who always watches out and knows what's going on, or at least tries to letting them go and explore the world and hoping that you've done enough. And it's also the time when the young people, I get a lot of clients that, besides deciding where they want to go and being nervous about the application process and getting references and all those things, they actually realize it's real. Like, I'm going to leave home soon and I'm going to be on my own making decisions about what I study, who I hang out with, how much time I spend doing the different things that I want to do, living in a foreign land. And it in itself builds anxieties, and how that plays out in terms of arguments, in terms of self-confidence issues blaring up, in terms of a lot of things. This is when it starts to happen. This is when it starts to really come to the surface. And it's really a great opportunity for growth and for self-reflection.
No, brilliant. And I think it's really interesting. So you were mentioning the parents' anxiety and the child's anxiety as well, or young adult, it's anxiety as well. Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I think it's brilliant because once you can identify that possibly this anxiety is going to appear, then you can start preparing for it, can't you?
Absolutely. I mean, for the parents, what it normally comes out as is a bit of an irritation and frustration with their child. I call them their child because to us as parents,
I know,
children, no matter what age, is still our child. My mom still calls me her baby girl. And they don't understand where it's coming from. So they think that it's always about the buttons that the teenager's pressing. And oftentimes when we start to get deeper into it, a little bit of a tear might come from mom, or a little bit of shouting might come from dad. And they start to realize that they themselves are having an emotional issue with this new adjustment. Because if you remember, teenage years is really hard for parents, right? You go from being the primary caregiver that gets all the loves and hugs and cuddles of the, 0 to maybe 10, 11 age. Then you get that transition and you think, oh, they're just going through a phase, the tween age. And then they get
Yeah.
into their teenage years where they're trying to exert some independence and show some bit about who they are and make a stand in the world and develop some ideas and really start to make their mark. And they can't, because you're still under my roof and you still have to do your homework. And I can still tell you when to go to bed and when to go to school and all those things. And
Yes.
there's that transition period for parents, and most parents have a really hard time dealing with it, right? Why aren't they talking to me? I used to be important and now I'm not, and it's all about the friends, and all these issues pop up. And before the parents get a chance to really define, figure out what this means and how to manage it with their teenager, they say, okay, mom, bye, dad, I'm out the door. And so, as you can imagine, this leaves quite a bit of anxiety for parents, and it's partly, what we work with when we're trying to build that right ecosystem to support the children, because let's face it, going to university is very hard. And in this day and age, it's even harder because there's even more external factors if they go to university, for instance, in North America, um, where, things like pot is legal, or, they're 18 and they can't drink here in the UAE, but they go over there and they're legal in Canada. And all
Yeah.
these things come up. And if they don't have the right relationship with their parents now to talk about it, or to feel that they can turn to them when they are in a difficult position, then what does that mean for the family unit? When do the parents find out their child is having a hard time? If they don't enjoy the major they chose and they want to change it, how do you break it to your parents? How do you, find that space in that time frame of not turbulence, but just change?
Oh yeah. And I think if you have a healthy relationship with your, parents and children, if they have a healthy relationship, like you said, that could just make the difference between, well, failing, not failing, being happy, not being happy. I mean, so you can take, your path can change in an instant, can't it? Like if you're going through a really difficult time and then you just feel like you have nobody to talk to, you can really go downhill and maybe pick the wrong people to find connections with. And then that could lead to more problems, serious problems.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've seen it. And
Have you?
universities can only do so much, right? And then again, it's up to the young person to feel comfortable enough to go to the university counselor and say, I have a problem, or I'm feeling stuck, or I'm feeling anxious, or whatever it is. And I mean, it might seem like late to do it in the January before they go to university, but any time is a good time to start to
Yes.
work on building those communication skills, and learning how to express, especially issues or feelings like anxiety, and nervousness about going away.
Yeah, no, I love that. Any time is a good time. And I think that is such a powerful statement because it's never too late, is it? Any time is a good time. I absolutely love that.
Anytime.
Simple, powerful. And also, so what was I going to say? So what kind of things so parents, I know parents come to you, teenagers, young adults come to you. So how do you sort of start with them? Because I can imagine some parents just do not know where to start.
They don't. And in situations like that, then it's the parent and I,
Yeah.
or the parent and the coach. It's parents need a safe space to be able to say, oh man, I wish I had a guidebook for this and it's not working, right? Like they
Yeah.
need that space to comfortably talk about their perceived failures. And I say perceived because there is no failure in parenting. There's no guidebook. But we parent based on the perception of what we believe is a good parent. And that's why there's a million ways to parent. And everyone sees a million and one books or podcasts about what to do and what not to do. To be honest with you, it's too complex to follow any one rule, right? You've
Yeah.
got culture, society, you've got family, you've got friends, you've got your own expectations based on your own experiences. So the first thing to do is really to help parents understand, what is your expectation? What is the type of, or the level of, for that parenting that you're actually aiming towards? Because if you don't know what that is, then you haven't failed, because you're just sort of doing what you do, and that's absolutely great. If you can identify what the expectation is, then the next step is to understand, well, was that fair to yourself to have that expectation?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because when I was young, and I'm going to take it personally for a second, because I mean, I know that a lot of my clients like the personal story.
Definitely.
When I was young, my parents parented me in a way that I never wanted to parent my children, because
Oh, wow.
we brought up in the environment that children are to be seen and not heard, right? Unless it's academic focus, in which you could be heard till kingdom come as long as you have good marks, you were almost a subcategory of human, right? Like there's adults and then there's children. And I always knew that, or I always felt that that wasn't fair. Whereas there are parents out there that no, for them, this is okay, right? You have to have order and you have to have this structure in order for young people to learn their place, or to learn how to become that adult. And if your child does not subscribe or easily fall into place at that view, there's conflict. And that conflict, while the parent might be saying, no, this is what needs to happen, society has ruined our kids, et cetera, they also have the issue of, oh my goodness, I failed because I know the type of parent I want to be and I wasn't able to successfully achieve that. And so that's where we work together to sort of identify, well, where has that fallen and why has that happened? So that in most cases, they start to see that you can't necessarily control your child, which is, a lot of it comes down to control.
Yeah.
But you can learn how to be supportive in a way that you bring them back, because now they're no longer children. So you did a great job when they were really small. You felt really undervalued in the role of a parent that you wanted to play when they're a teenager. And now they're going into adulthood, and you have yet another chance to have a new start. And what could that look like? Stop thinking of them now as the children, start thinking towards developing that other relationship.
Yeah.
And now let's identify, how can we build the next step in the relationship, so that, when they are in their 20s or 30s, and you want that type of whatever closeness is appropriate for you, you can have an understanding with your now young adult as to how to appeal to them in that way. So that's how I start with them. And then, and so that could sometimes be 2, 3, 4 sessions, whatever it is. If the family has had trauma, sometimes it can be a bit longer. And then you work with the young person to understand, what kind of relationship do you want with your parents going forward, right? Looking back is not always helpful because it's the past. You can use lessons from the past to understand what is achievable in the future. Exactly. But then when you start to have those type of relationships, the teenager or the young adult also now comes to the table and realizes, hey, I do have a say. I've been acting out as a reaction or retaliation, but I have a say. And I could do something different with my relationship with my parents. And so when you start to empower them in the realization of that, and you empower the parents to say, all is not lost, we're in a new beginning now, you start to see a real growth in that relationship.
Definitely. And I think having that third person like you coming in and just giving them the space to be seen and heard, that's what it is again, isn't it? It's like,
it is
being validated, like, you are important, you are worth listening to. And I think when you were talking about how you speak to parents, and as well how you help parents, I was thinking, I guess every relationship is always evolving, isn't it? So we have to always constantly work at it, whether it's the parent and child. I mean, all kinds of relationships. It's a constant, because we're growing and evolving all the time, aren't we? So our relationships will be changing. So I really liked that when you were talking about that. But let's just say hi to Jacob. Hi, Jacob.
Hello, Jacob.
Thank you for joining us. And whoever's listening, please feel free to ask us questions, comments. We'd love to hear from you. But yes, So Audrey, yeah, no, it's very, very interesting, your work. So so what would you say? So it sounds like the first thing you would ask the parents and the child is, what do you want, basically?
What's next?
What's
You know,
next?
you put it out on the table. You put it out on the table and you just say, this is a safe space. What's next? And I mean, oftentimes it's not as simple as a one-word answer, right? Like, oh, I want a better
Yeah.
relationship, or, it's complicated for different families. I mean, the family that I've worked with last week, the husband and wife had two different ideas
Oh, yeah.
on what they expected. And so they had to come together first and foremost and agree. They ended up agreeing to disagree, which was absolutely fine too, because you can have
Yes.
different relationships with your children. They don't have to be the same.
Yes.
And I think that a lot of the times parents believe that if you're going to be a successful parental unit, you have to be one voice. When actually you can show children different ways to interact and grow with different people, but still
Yeah.
have love and respect and communication and all of those key things involved. And to be
Yeah.
honest with you, I think it's healthy, because
Yeah.
when they go out into the work world and they make relationships with different bosses that have different styles, different managers, different CEOs, or they start their own business at some point, they need to be aware that those differences are okay.
Mm.
It cannot be one size fits all, because
Yeah.
we are not made that way.
I love that. And it widens their view on things, doesn't it? It gives them a whole
Yes.
nother perspective. So I think definitely it's healthy. As long as you said the values are the same, I guess.
Everything comes down to the values. And I mean, one of the core tenets of the Bedrock program, as you know, is about core values. What
Yes.
is the important value that you're working through in this relationship? Why is it important to you? And then how do we now make sure that that stays as a foundation to what you're doing? So,
Mm.
for a mother, like last week, it was about open communication. That was her most important thing. She didn't care about much else as long as she felt she was in the know. But then she had to come to grips with the fact that now, as a mother, you are in the know to a point. You're not going to be in the know for everything, because you can't always be the best friend,
Yeah, definitely.
right?
And definitely. And what would you do? I don't know if this has happened to you. It's happened to me a couple of times, but I'm just curious. Like if you're working with parents, I don't know if you work with them together, but if you're working with one parent or two, and you really fundamentally disagree on how they're, you know, parenting their children, because you feel like it could be really, really
Dangerous.
yeah, dangerous and unhealthy. How do you deal with that? Like, do you say?
You're absolutely right. It's tricky, right? My role as a coach is not to teach people how to parent, right?
Yes.
And it's not to impart my cultural values or my views on any one person based on their own experiences. So, I mean, I have had situations where personally I feel like there's something here that doesn't quite fit, and I'm not quite sure how to handle it. What
Yeah.
I have a sort of a default mode that I go into, and that default mode is to mirror back to the parent both the positive that they are seeking from their behavior, but also the perceived could be negative that the
Okay.
child is going through. Because oftentimes when you only see it as, well, I'm doing this because of this, I'm making this choice because I want them to do X, it's you're blindsided by the
Yeah.
idea that it could actually be also contributing to Y, and Y might be the behavior you're trying to get them to
Mm.
stop doing in the first place.
Yeah. And sometimes,
And mhm.
oh, sorry. Yeah, carry on.
No, 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 go ahead.
No, I was just going to say sometimes, yeah, when you articulate what they're saying, they hear it for the first time, and they
And
realize.
sometimes it's in scenario based, right? So you're saying that and this, and I understand that if you follow through, then this is what you're expecting, yes. But what if they think that what you're doing is causing them to feel this way, and this is the reaction? And sometimes when I say it, they say, but that's the reaction I got. Could it be that they're actually internalizing it differently? Right?
Exactly.
Or and it's just it's a really small coaching technique, but it has a significant impact, especially if
Yes.
you're able to vocalize the same thing they're trying to deal with that you didn't know they were dealing with. So they never
Yes.
told you. And then you say, but these are a couple of other repercussions that could happen. And they're like, oh, that's what happened. And I'm like, okay. So there's a possibility here, long shot, that your child is actually hearing this, or this. And what could be happening is you're pushing them in the wrong direction. And normally, when a parent then starts to understand that, they're open to, I can't say it's easy to change, but they're
Yeah.
open
Yeah.
to changing their perception on the situation. And then becomes the real magic of working together and saying, okay, how can we look at dealing with this differently? Let's explore a few options that might support you, because not every technique works for everybody, right? Some
Of course.
people need to go through a few different techniques before they find what works for their relationship, for their thought patterns, for their belief
Definitely.
systems, all kinds of things, right?
It's exploring, isn't it? I really feel like coaching is just exploring. And I don't know about you, but I really believe the process, it never sort of ends, does it? Of course, it helps you and you move on and you change, you shift, you learn, but it's ongoing, I think.
As coaches, we are constantly evolving, and that's why when I said anxiety around independence, it's because
Yes.
this anxiety follows you depending on your level of comfort with change, right? Independence is just another time in your life in which you experience change.
Yes.
When you get your first job, there's anxiety and
Yeah.
nervousness, some
Yeah.
people excitement. When you meet that special someone, there's a level of anxiety, like, oh my goodness, what if I lose them? And what if this doesn't work? And what if I put all in and they're all out? Then there's the marriage. Oh my goodness, is this going to happen? What are my dreams about what a married life is going to be if one
Yeah.
chooses to get married or a long-term relationship? Then there's having the family, and then your cycle repeats. So, really, what we're talking about is the anxiety around the first fundamental time of change in which both the young adult and the parent have a real say. And that's what causes the anxiety, because that young person up until now has never really had a real say about their life, right? We
Yes.
tell them when to go to bed, we tell them when to go to school, we tell them when they have to do their
Wow.
homework, we take them to their extracurricular activities, we tell them to think like an adult, but really we want them to do X, Y, and Z. And they know if they toe the line, they'll get all the benefits that they get as a young adult. And now they're hitting independence, where
The roles are
like
changing slightly.
everything,
Yeah.
everything's changing. And it's so exciting, but it's also quite nerve-wracking.
Yes, yes, yes. No, definitely. What does Jacob say? We've got a long. If I may ask, generally speaking, parents usually have wonderful relations with their children. Say when a baby is born, it's all love, care, etc. However, it seems that at some point in life, things change and fall apart, and the build-up starts from then onwards. How do we be aware of a change when it's happening and therefore prevent it, or work on maintaining the relation?
So it's a really, really, really good question, right? Because it fundamentally comes down to what we're talking about. You'll normally notice the change happens in this adolescent time frame, right?
Yes.
As the prefrontal cortex is starting to develop, they're developing concepts of who am I, what is my place in the world, what is important to me, and how is this different from what my parents thought? How am I influenced by the world around me differently than my parents' expectations and experiences up until now? And what you'll sort of notice is some children will withdraw, so they won't share as much as they used to. Some young people, and I mean, parents tell me all the time, they come into the house, they go up to the room, they close the door, I don't see them until dinner. If I see them at dinner, right? Then they
Yeah.
grab their food. And again, depending on the household and whether or not, like in our household, dinner is a must together in the house at the table, tuck away. We try and connect. But as a parent, you will notice when these things are happening.
Yeah.
And then as these changes develop more and more, then there starts to become that shift. right? The questions that are asked are different, or the responses that you get back from questions are different, or you'll notice that they'll come to you a little less for your opinion on
Yes.
important things, or they'll start to voice an opinion that you've never heard before. Oh, where's this coming from? And that's when you start to notice that change. For some parents, it's gradual, and for some, it's a very stark transition. Like something around the age of 13, 14, they don't know where their child's gone. Like
And
they
what would you?
just,
Oh yeah, no, definitely. And what would you say would be like the best thing to do? Like for me, I would say like have a conversation, like with your like what? How would you, if parents are
yeah,
thinking?
it all comes down to that, to the young person. So this is where I sort of start to look at the teenager, right? Because it cannot always be about the parent. It's also got to be about the teen. The whole reason the conversation's changing is because they are developing
True.
a sense of self, and they're trying to figure out what that means. So that's when you start to look, how do they communicate? What is their sort of disc profile? Are they an I and they are talkative anyways, and they are just struggling with getting out how they feel and wanting to, or are they an S and they're a little bit more a people pleaser and they'll just do what will keep everybody happy and quiet for the time being, but they never really get a chance to explore and express themselves? Or are they a D and they'll just be like, well, these are the two things I need from you, mom, dad. Like, I don't want to hear anything else. This is annoying. I'm out of here, right? Or you get the I, and that's the kind of the analytical, and they want to sit down and have those hardcore conversations about specific topics, but not everything. And you kind of let your child show you what they are wanting, and you've got to embrace some of that. It cannot be, no,
Yes.
I don't like what they want, so it has to be what I want. You have to start to swallow, what you were doing before, and embrace that it's going to be a bit of a new relationship, so that your teenager can see that you're coming to the table as well. And when they see that with you, it becomes a little easier for them to, not all at once, it takes time, but break down their barriers, and open up a little bit more.
Exactly. And I think when you show that you're there to listen, they'll listen to you. I mean, it just you're modeling the behavior
Yes.
again as well, aren't you? So it's going
Yes.
to
It's
pick up.
modeling, and then it goes back to active listening. I know we've
Yeah,
talked about this before, but it's my favorite. I mean,
me
it
too.
really is holding your tongue as the parent and actively trying to understand where the young adult is coming from. What are they saying? Not just, oh, that's not how we did it in my days, and then going off into your own diatribe because they never really had a chance to express themselves, but to
Yeah.
actively listen to what they're trying to say and ask really engaging questions that allow them to come out, um, and feel comfortable exploring with you as a parent, to see where are the boundaries and what can we talk about. And okay, you are listening and you care, because we always care, but they don't always think we care because
Yeah.
we don't listen. They think
Yeah.
it's all about us, not them.
I think active listening is so powerful that I think it can solve so many problems in the family or in life in general, because like when you're actually actively listening to that person, well, it gives them the space to probably figure out the solutions themselves as well. So you don't actually have to give them the solutions. They will figure them out if you just give them the space and listen. I mean, I think a lot of parents sometimes think they have to jump in and solve, don't they? But it's the opposite. Step back, give them the space. They will figure it out. And not
Yeah,
just kids, everybody.
the only you're right. You're right. But I think one of the things that we have to recognize is, as a parent, we have ego. And I
Mm,
don't mean ego in a bad way. I just mean ego, right? In the pure psychological sense. It's a sense of self and who
yeah.
I am. And if that ego within the parent is, I am a parent and my role is to guide, then it makes it really hard to active
Mm,
listen, right? Because you already believe that if you hear something that sounds like it could be a problem or an issue or something, I have an answer. I will find an answer. I will make an answer.
yeah.
Whereas putting that ego, that self aside and saying, okay, I'm not going to give an answer. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to let them speak. And when they ask me for an answer, I'm going to, reflect back, but I understand that this is what's important to you. And so if this is important to you, what would you do? Or how would you view this? Or, so that they feel like I'm talking to you, but you're listening to me. And now you're actually helping me figure out how to think about this in a way that will help me, as opposed to you're thinking about it from a parent's point of view and you just don't get me anyways.
Exactly. No, it's so interesting, Audrey, and we could talk about this for hours, but time is up. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Jacob, for your questions and comments, and everybody else who was listening. Audrey, how can people find you?
Oh, you can reach me at the Bedrock Program. Our website is www.thebedrockprogram.com. You can email us directly at info@thebedrockprogram.com. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and we're on LinkedIn. So
Amazing.
Reach out anytime.
And yeah, if you want to put that in the comments on LinkedIn as well, your links might be easier.
Absolutely.
And is there just one thing you would like to say before we go? One takeaway?
I guess the one takeaway would be for parents to recognize that the anxiety is both ways, right? And it's okay to feel that anxiety about independence and the child, your baby growing up, and own it. If you own the emotions that you're feeling, it becomes a lot easier to deal with them and to support your young adult, because they will see that you too are vulnerable, and that opens the door to all kinds of beautiful conversations. So own your anxiety, and if possible, get some help if you don't know how to express it or to work through it.
I love that. So not fighting against our emotions. Yeah.
Thank
you so much, Audrey.
Thank you, Jasmine, for having me again.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge and everything. And thank you, everybody. I will see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.